All right, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for the 2024 college football season. Hey, it's been a little minute since y'all have heard from us. We are glad to finally be back. Fellas, hey, I know it's been a long time. There's been a lot of changes since we have been around. Hold on, we still working out kicks. Hold on. Be back. Um All right, here we go. So, hey, first mix up. Hey, so let's jump right in it. Hey, yesterday we had week 0 go on. Florida State, Georgia Tech, I think was the biggest headline that we saw coming into the season. Florida State being first mix up. Hey. Still trying to figure things out. Hey, tell me what y'all think about that game yesterday. Y'all go ahead and dive into it. I'm gonna try to fix things over here.
So I'll be real quick about it. I'm not the huge, biggest fan of, Florida State or whatever. I still last year don't think they should have been in the playoff. But my biggest takeaway from the game was Roydell Williams left Alabama when Nick Saban retired, thinking the grass was greener in Florida State and lost the opener, right? So I wonder if he's sitting there wondering whether he should have stayed in Tuscaloosa or not. I mean, listen, Georgia Tech, nobody knows what they got this year, but we all kind of had some sort of idea as to what Florida State was going to bring to the table, seeing as though they made so much noise about not making it to the playoff last year. I'm thinking y'all coming out kicking and screaming this year. To lay an egg against Georgia Tech, I think is just deplorable. And Roydell Williams, I'm glad you're gone.
Yeah, I thought the game in overall was, to me, exactly what college football needed for an opener, a big time upset. I think Florida State really got to look themselves in the mirror. I think they did a lot of hoopla and spitting and just talking junk this offseason. I'm just like, it's a lot of what we saw last year, just a lot of whole bunch of nothing, a lot of shadow, but nothing to come with it. It's just something I just think is interesting when you think about the ACC and all of which team do y'all have that's really going to be the team that's going to take over the country like y'all say y'all going to do. It's so much talk behind it. It's so much everything behind it that exactly what we saw yesterday, just the goose egg. And I think it's something that everybody has to take notice of. And I think in this type of season with all the changes that we're going to get to in this podcast is going to be something that where you really got to be on top of every single game this year. And to have Florida State come out in week 1 against Georgia Tech, not to give any Georgia Tech any hate, but it's Georgia Tech. You can't do that. So I think it's something that we got to really look at. And I think when you look at Florida State as a team, it's a lot of people on that team that you wish they would have been better. This is what I see when I think of Florida State, a team that I wish that could be better, and they're not. So it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really interesting. I think they laid a goose egg and they're gonna have to bounce back, but we're gonna see. What you think, Van?
I think the biggest thing right now with Florida State is you lose so much, right? You lose 2 of your top offensive weapons. You lose your quarterback at the end of the season last year, and then I think it hurts even more because you made such a big deal out of missing the playoff last year, right? I mean, it was a whole thing, and this has been a thing that everybody's been talking about all off season about, oh, Florida State, they're here to make a statement. They got back in the portal. They got a bunch of guys in. You bring DJU in, who's been at Oregon State and Clemson. And I think Clemson fans are kind of like, laughing in their face right now because it's like, all right, now y'all see what we were dealing with. Now it's your problem. Now it's your trouble to deal with. And I mean, I think they had a stat going up yesterday where it was like he was 11 of 12, but his average yards in the air was like negative 0.1 or whatnot. So just a lot of dink and dunk type of stuff. But I think they got some answers to figure out. I think Mike Norvell is of course he's gonna be the guy for the job. But I still think, and I think this is going back to what you said, Drew, this conference, the ACC is, I think it's wide open. I don't think there's a clear number 1 team that everybody's like, all right, this is the guy, this is the team that's going to be, the best. I think it's wide open. I think it's wide open. I think there's a clear number 1 team that everybody's like, all right, this is the guy, this is the team that's going to be the team to beat in the conference, because now you've got a guaranteed spot in one of those top 4 spots in the college football playoffs if you win this conference. But I think it's wide open, and I think with it being wide open, it's not panic button yet. It's a week 0 game. There's a lot of football left to be played. Let's see how we go from there. And see if you can battle your way back into this conversation. You win the games you need to win, but you're already down 1 conference game already. You're 0-1, not only in your record book, but in your conference play now, with it being Georgia Tech. So I mean, I think it's real interesting.
And here's one more thing to think about here too, just in regards to Florida State. This is, Florida State's a team that has a lot of tradition in regards to winning, right? They were the king, of college football not too long ago, right? They're trying to get back. They're a very passionate fan base, and I get it. Bama was there, after Gene Stallings, right? We're just clamoring for another coach, the team that's going to be able to get us back to the mountaintop, right? And I think what happened yesterday to Florida State fans and inside that locker room, I think it just kind of put them back to where they were. Now, I'm not saying that's where they belong, but it just put them back to where they were before they climbed their way to success last year. Are they who we thought they were or are? Maybe so. We'll see. I'm not banking on them, though.
I think my thing with Florida State is it's not so much about the outside world asking the question of who are they. I think it's a look in the mirror of who are we when it comes to Florida State, because to me, the ACC is such an interesting conference this season. Now, let me be real frank and real up forward and real front forward with this. The ACC is one of the weaker conferences in college football today. So when you think about the college football playoffs and the 12-team playoffs, if the ACC doesn't get that top 4 spot, how many other teams are going to get in there? Do y'all think? Just real quick. Out of 12 teams, how many teams do you think the ACC?
Maybe 2. I'm talking about maybe, and that's only because they are a quote-unquote power conference. You know what I'm saying?
Got you.
Right.
Got you. So let's say this, though. You've already lost a conference game.
Yeah.
You're in the back seat when it comes to your conference championship game. So you're already missing the number 1 spot. Now they can have a season where they can get that number 2 ACC spot. But that means you have to beat Clemson. You have to beat Duke. You have to do a lot of things in your season where it's not up to debate about if we got any wiggle room. And I think that's a pressure point that this team isn't ready for. That's my standpoint on why this game to me means way more than any other game is. It's always tough when you open your season with a conference opponent, because in today's world, you can't afford to drop too many conference games, because that's the only way that you can guarantee yourself in the playoffs. So the Florida State, to me, is still going to be a top-tier team this year. I think they're going to be a top 3 ACC team this year.
I'll agree with that.
But in today's world, top 3 might not be enough anymore.
Not in the ACC. SEC, you probably got a shot. ACC, you done if you in that third spot.
I agree 100%. And when you got everybody talking about Florida State, talking about Clemson, talking about Miami as the top 3 dogs in that conference, you can't afford to be bottom of that 3. Mm-hmm. So it's really going to be, is Miami going to be the team that everybody claims they're going to be, or is it Clemson going to be the team that everybody claims they're going to be? Got a lot of Clemson fans out there not throwing no hate to anybody this early in the season just yet, not shooting them any guns off yet. But it's question marks. We got to figure this stuff out. Florida State, you failed the first test of the year, which is never a good deal. Never a good deal. Never a good deal. So we got a lot to talk about tonight, but Florida State, you really going on the back burner for a couple of weeks. We're not going to talk about y'all. Y'all going to sit down for a while.
Yeah, cool off. Hey, so on that topic though, while we're on the topic of the college football playoff right now, this is the first year we've expanded now to 12 teams, right? So with it being 12 teams, the only guaranteed spots in here are the top 4, right? So you got your Power 4 teams, you got an SEC spot, you got a Big 10 spot, you've got a ACC spot, which we just touched on, and you've got a Big 12 spot. Going off of that, I want to get your opinion of, we're going to get into it since we're an SEC dominant podcast, right? We're gonna get into how many SEC teams we think are gonna be in it. But to harp on, how realistic is it for these smaller schools now to make it? Because now you're looking at teams that are sitting in that, ranked 10 through 22-ish range, no matter what conference you're in, being a very possible team that can make it into the college football playoff. Sean and Andrew, we touched on this about a month ago when everybody was here in Columbia. Um, Look at Liberty. A lot of people are hyping up Memphis right now. If a 10-2 Memphis team is now ranked, 18th in the country, how do they look? Because they have a Power Five team they get to go play this year too, and a Liberty team. What happens if Liberty goes undefeated? Do they make it in now over some of these? Let's take the SEC because this is where we focus on, over these middle tier SEC teams like a Missouri, like a Oklahoma, like you never know where Ole Miss is going to end up. Would you take them over these SEC teams in this playoff? Because this is supposed to be what this opens up for. Given that these SEC teams end up with, let's give them 3 losses, right? A 3-loss SEC team versus an undefeated Liberty or Memphis team. What's their realistic shot in making it into this playoff now under this new format?
I think they're going to have a shot, right? I think expanding the 12 teams, I think was a great idea to give some of these teams like Liberties and Memphises and Boise States from teams that are the Cinderella type stories a chance, right? But at the end of the day, the Cinderella story is working basketball, not in football, man. You know what I'm saying? It's an opportunity. At the end of the day, if you go back the past, I don't know, however many years they were running the 14 playoff, the top 4 teams for the most part were the best teams, okay? And the best team typically came out of that, okay? That's not going to change. When you whittle 12 down to 4, you're probably going to have what you would have had if you only had a 14 playoff, right? But I love the opportunity for the other teams to get some additional revenue, to get the fan base cranked up. It's going to be a very exciting thing. We're playing some of these games on campus, and chances are these little teams are going to be playing away games. But man, this is what every college kid wants, and it's giving these teams an opportunity to recruit, to say, hey, we can make it to the playoff. But for teams 6 through 12, that's all they're really going to be doing is making it to the playoff. We're looking at early exits, and we're going to whittle ourselves down to the best 4 teams when it's all said and done. And, we'll get a good show. But, TV revenue, it's going to be through the roof. I love it for the game. I love it for the recruits. I love it for the kids. But at the end of the day, the best teams are going to come out of the SEC and the Big Ten when it's all said and done. They really could break off and do this on their own. And that may be where we're actually going to at some particular point in time. I'm hearing people talk about that kind of stuff. But I don't think Cinderella stories belong in the game of football. I don't think there's any room for a Cinderella story in the game of football. It's just too fast. It's too physical. And if you're not jumping the highest, running the fastest, and lifting the most as a collective group, you're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, and I'm right there with Sean. I think that on a video game status, the 12-team playoff makes these Cinderella stories look great. Because on a video game, I can actually come in there and beat these top-tier schools like Georgia, like Alabama, like Tennessee. I think, to me, the top conferences like the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC are too loaded for these other teams to really make a noise. I think you might get one small team for every 3 years, one small team to get an upset every 5 to 10 years, and that's going to be that Cinderella story that's going to make everybody happy and go lucky and make movies about it 20 years down the road. When you think about the basis or the average of what's going on in this college football atmosphere, it's not going to be too much different than what we've seen in the past. It's just going to be a couple other teams that their season isn't going to go down the drain with one loss. It's going to be these 2-loss teams. It's going to be these 3-loss big name teams that are going to have a second chance in the playoffs to really make a name for themselves and really say, hey, we're not who we are if we lost a big game in Death Valley, LSU or Clemson Death Valley. We're not who we are if we lost a big game down in Bryant-Denny. You know, we're not these teams that you might see on a big time scale lose big time games. Their season's not going to be over with. These small teams, to me, aren't going to be better than the third or fourth Big Ten team. The Big 12 team, even though the Big 12 isn't like that, to me, the other three conferences, but they're still not going to be better than them. Now, to me, it's all going to matter about storylines. Storylines are going to be the deal for these smaller teams. Do you have a team that's undefeated and is that 10th, 11th, and 12th team dealing with an injured starting quarterback? Or, you know, what storyline is going to prosper throughout the season that's going to allow these other teams to make a name for themselves or make a debate for themselves? Because I think that's really all that's really laid out for everybody else is just a bigger debate to really expand on. To me, I think the top 4 teams, the top 8 teams are still going to be who we always thought they are going to be. The purebreds of these conferences, because recruiting still matters in today's game. The type of player you got at your school is going to matter when you get to these big time moments. Yeah, we're going to have some fascinating fun matchups and away games and home games for certain teams in this college football playoffs. But trust me, I promise you, the big deal is the big championship teams are not going to be much different what we've seen for the past 30 years. And I think that's something that a lot of people are going to take time to get adjusted to. But on college football 25 is the only time you really see these true top teams win national championships or see these true little teams beat big teams. That's the only time we really see it. It's not something that really comes true in real life. So we're going to have a lot to focus on this season. I think it's going to be a lot of teams in the hunt, but small teams, y'all going to have to show me before I start coming on this podcast and speaking gibberish. So we're going to have to see what's going on.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to harp on this. If you go back and look at the final CFP poll from last year and go 12-1, it gives you a real eye opener of what we're looking at. You got Oklahoma, and no team in that top 12 has more than 2 losses.
Right.
Each of the bottom teams, that's all they got is 2 losses. So you got Oklahoma at 12, and this is 12 going to 1. Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Missouri, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, Alabama, Texas, Washington, Michigan, right? So these are all blue blood programs in college football. The closest team you've got down here as one of these smaller schools is Liberty, which was at 23 in the last poll, sitting at 13-0, right? So I think the only way they are going to get in is if they have to schedule, you got to schedule Power 4 opponents. You got to let your record get you into the playoff. You got to say, hey, we went and we went up against some of the better teams in other conferences and came out with some wins. Even if it's 1, even if it's 2, you got to get those on your record to be taken seriously, to have a shot at maybe these lower tier spots in the playoff.
But in saying that, your scheduling don't gotta be versus Alabama and Georgia and upset them every year.
It don't.
You gotta
You're
put
right.
like a Utah on your schedule, like an Arizona or like a North Carolina State on your schedule.
Correct.
Have 3 or 4 ranked opponent wins, then we might be able to get in the conversation. But the teams you named out are teams that this year, because of the conference realignment, which we got to get to that, is the name around them are going to be so difficult to get around. It's not an Oklahoma that's in the Big 12 and that played one good team and they're 10-2. You know, it's not going to be that. It's going to be Oklahoma, who's an SEC team, who has an SEC schedule that you're going to jump above, especially if they winning games. You're talking about an SEC team that's got 2 to 3 losses versus a Liberty who have you beat? I don't think that's going to be really a deep conversation. I think once every so often you're going to have that conversation, but I don't think it's something that's going to be reoccurring or as often as people can imagine it to be. Not yet.
So y'all, hey, are we going to just ignore the Pac-2? I just got to say it. I got to say it. We can move on. I just say we going to just ignore them? Huh? Are they not even worth talking about this year?
I think it's time to move until they get some more teams in there, until they figure out what they want to be or disband it all together. I think it's time to let them go. I think it's time, man. Nobody's talking about them 2 teams over there.
I think it's just sad. I think we need to host a funeral for him. I don't think people gonna really understand how sad it is until later in the season, but we're gonna see, man. We're gonna move on and move out with them. They can sit right there where they at.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm done with that.
Yeah. All right. So transitioning off of that. I mean, hey, that's a great segue, Sean. Hey, I appreciate it because that brings you right into conference realignment is what we want to get into now. And this is a lot of topics that we missed in the offseason. We're gonna touch on. We're gonna be a better podcast going forward, keeping up with kind of this stuff even into the offseason. But right now, let's get into it. So we've got as a SEC podcast, right? We've got two new members. Well, two big changes with the two new members, right? You've got Texas and Oklahoma who are now in the SEC. You know, they are spread out onto everybody's schedule. There's no longer an East, there's no longer a West. Everybody's in one giant pool. The top two teams will make it to Atlanta at the end of the season to go play in the SEC championship game. And I tell you, some of these schedules are brutal. I've got my idea on who I think the top 3 or 4 teams are going to be in the SEC. And even then, you look at their schedules and it's like you got some doozies on there where you're going to have some weekends where you're going to be fighting in back-to-back weeks now. There's no, and as for Texas and Oklahoma, there's no, okay, I had Alabama at Bama last year, and then I get to kind of ease back and coast back into Big 12 play where I'm back with my tier of schools and I can kind of just coast along until the next big team comes. You're in the SEC now. You've got every weekend is a big time matchup where you got to bring your all week in and week out. And if you end up with, I know the playoff is expanded now, but you end up with 3 to 4 losses, your season's down the drain. There's no looking back. There's no turning around and looking back and saying, hey, we still got a shot and stuff. It's over at that point. How do you think these two teams are going to fare in this conference just as a starting point? How do y'all think they're going to do as far as Texas and Oklahoma?
So I was really high on Texas until I learned that they got running backs dropping like flies, right? Oklahoma, I think they're going to finish middle of the pack. Their schedule just does not really work out for Oklahoma. Really, honestly, the schedule don't work out for nobody. Listen, I'm going to tell you who is not going to be in the playoff right now. I will bet 3 paychecks.
Okay.
I'll tell you who's not going to be in. It's Florida. Florida has the toughest schedule of any team that has ever had in the whole history of the Southeastern Conference. Florida is they might win 3 games this year. Okay. Maybe. Okay. So anyway, not Florida. Listen, what the SEC has done, I think is genius. They are pioneers when it comes down to making sure that their conference is viable, making sure that their conference is competitive, making sure that their conference is rich. They've got it all. And the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, they could not have done a better job. Now, at the top, the SEC is so good. They are so freaking good with the additions of Texas, Oklahoma. There's so much tradition in those two schools. We bring rivalries back that were lost, old rivalries that were lost. I'm not just talking about Texas and Texas A&M. I'm talking about, Oklahoma, back in the day when they was in the big, what was it, the Big 8 or whatever it was. Arkansas was in that conference. I mean, they did such a good job. But from a competitive perspective, Oklahoma's not going to be there this year. This is not their year. Texas had a chance. If they got some running backs, I think they were going to be there because all the pieces are there in Austin. All the pieces are there. But you still got Georgia, you still got Alabama, you still got LSU, you still got the juggernauts. And I just can't let Oklahoma and Texas come in and just all of a sudden say, hey, I'm better than Bama. I'm better than Oklahoma, I'm better than LSU. I'm better than Georgia just because y'all just showed up. You know what I mean? It's not like that. I think they're both going to end up getting knocked down just a little bit, and we're going to have a Bama, Georgia type of situation like we have been having all this time, regardless of who's coaching these teams or whatever. You just can't walk in to the SEC and just do what you think you can do just because you beat Bama last year. No, that's not how it works. Yes, Texas has been recruiting like an SEC team. The offensive line and the defensive line, they're getting better. But at Georgia and Alabama, those offensive lines and defensive lines are already good. They've already been good. They weren't getting good. They already were good, and they're getting better. So I love the additions. I love the pageantry. I love the the night games that are going to be played in Death Valley and Tuscaloosa and Georgia between the hedges and in Austin and Oklahoma. It's going to be so freaking exciting. But I cannot allow Texas, Oklahoma to get in and say, hey, I'm going to be one of the top 3 best teams in your conference. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, to me, when I look at the SEC nowadays with the 2 new additions, I think that they're great additions. I think that they're everything that we thought that they would be. I think that when you think of what they're going to do in the SEC, I think to me it matters about preparation. And I think the team that's been more prepared for the past 3 years is Texas. So I think when you really look at what they're going to do in the SEC, I think to me Texas is going to be a top 5 SEC team. Oklahoma is going to get top 8. Now, when you think about this year, I think to me it's all about the depth of your team. And seeing Texas have some running back depth fall off, to me, is going to be something I think is going to hurt them. But I think when you think about what that team has been through these last couple of seasons, I think they are tested and experienced when you think about SEC type of football. Going how they went in the playoffs last year and also having the experiences against Bama 2 years in a row and be able to have both of those games be close in crazy environments gives Texas a little experience about what the SEC is going to be like, because you're not going to get much more than that. And I think both of their schedules are extremely tough this year. I think that Texas, with the team they have, regardless of injuries, is going to be more prepared to be successful this year. But the SEC, Jesus Christ, it's primetime football. It is prime time. There's going to be every single week of the SEC going to be ready to watch game. It's going to be something that everybody's going to have their eyes plugged in on. There's so many other reasons. I could piggyback on 4 to 5 different things that Sean touched on. The rivalries, the big timeness, just the emphasis on these games to win. Man, it's gonna be such more to do. I think I'm gonna hold my prediction. I know we're gonna do predictions in a little different podcast, different episode, different series. But to me, you can't put anybody out of the conversation right now when you think about those top 5. To me, you got Bama, you got Georgia, you got Texas, you got LSU, you got some other teams that I think are gonna creep in there, like Oklahoma, like Ole Miss, Tennessee. Man, this SEC is going to be something that everybody's going to have to watch this season. My prediction for when you think about the top 3 of the SEC is going to be who's going to have the best quarterbacks. I think the best quarterbacks are going to be the teams that are going to be the teams that are going to excel when you think of who can handle the pressure of what's to come. I'm a Bama fan forever, regardless if Nick Saban's here or not. But I think the experience that the Alabama team had from last season is something that you can't overlook. Georgia's got true experience. I think Texas got true experience. To me, those are the top 3, and that's going to be a full-out brawl of who's to get to the top. So there's so much to think of. But piggybacking on the true point of the conversation, true point of the question, Texas is going to be better than Oklahoma to me when you think about the new SEC teams. And I think it's going to take Oklahoma 3 to 5 years to really get adjusted to what's to come, because it's not going to be any pity-pat games. You can look at their schedule right now. Nothing's going to be easy. And we're going to see if they can get out this season with less than 3 losses.
And look, to talk about Oklahoma real quick, just because they got a defensive coach don't mean they're a defensive team. Oklahoma, when Lincoln Riley was there, did not play defense, okay? Brent Venables has been there. This is going to be his 3rd year. It takes more than 2 recruiting cycles to revamp a defense. I don't care how good of a defensive coach you are. Okay. That's going to be Oklahoma's problem. I know we ain't talking about Oklahoma. I'm just saying they're going to struggle because they are playing catch up. Texas was already a little more prepared in the trenches than Oklahoma. Oklahoma got to find some dogs to play defense before they can get into the conversation, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say. So when I'm looking at these 2 teams, right, I'm looking at Texas as a team that's already ready. I think they're like both of y'all said, they are primed to go ahead and ready. They've already been talked about as a potential conference champion, be in the championship game. They're looking at like being a playoff team off the bat. But you got to think back to what happened the last time this happened as far as realignment, when we brought A&M and Missouri into the conference. A&M came in kind of ready to fight right away, even though they never hit that pinnacle. You know, when Jimbo got there, the hype was always there. You kind of saw the flash in the pan, but they never catch fire. And when you look at Missouri, Missouri took a little longer to develop to adjust into being an SEC team. But when they did, they made it to a couple of SEC championship games in their tenure so far, being in the season, being in the conference. And now they're kind of figuring out their potential, whether they can be a top tier team, whether they're falling back. But you kind of see them jumping back and forth right now. And I think that's the same route that's going to kind of happen to Oklahoma. Because it's like you said, when it comes down to coaching, you can't turn a roster around in 2 years. It don't matter in 2 years. It don't matter how good of a coach you can be. You got to have talent. And that's the biggest thing in this conference is talent. You can coach all you want to. There's a different monster of talent and players that are out here on these fields week in and week out to be able to not only do it for 1 weekend or 2 weekends out of your season, but you got to do it back to back while on the road in these environments, which is the toughest environments in all of college football. I think it's going to be a tough task for Oklahoma, but I do think Texas has to figure out their running back room. They lost their 2 top backs already for the season, right? I think a lot of people will say off the bat, when you play in the SEC, 2 things are true. You got to be able to run the ball, and you got to be able to play defense. Defense, they still straight on, but now you in a situation where you asking Quentin Ewers to maybe drop back 45 times and pass it a game to try to keep your head above water in this conference. And I think that's where you're going to have a little bit of trouble, especially in your first season in this conference where you week in and week out playing top tier opponents.
I think the biggest thing to me with these 2 teams is going to be defense. I think you got to really understand what's coming at you. It's not just okay, cool, we're going to be fighting. Maybe there's going to be 3 to 5 possessions a game that are going to be really intense. These games are going to be intense from the time that first ball is kicked off to the end of the game. When we talk about Bama went on that spree of winning in that time frame between like 2009 and 2018, it's not just because of they had the most talent. It's because they were ready to present themselves at the right moment. To me, I don't think Oklahoma is nowhere near ready for that. I think Texas has proven that they have the talent around, but to me, it's going to still take a lot more recruiting to get them to that point where they can really stand 10 toes down with teams and not just have spurs. So I think Texas, to me, because they have the deeper team, is why they're going to be better longer than Oklahoma in this conference. But to me, when you think about the college realignment that Texas A&M benefited from and Missouri benefited from, both of them teams still got the chance to benefit from 2 divisions in the SEC. Oklahoma and Texas don't get the benefit from divisions no more. You got to be top 2, top 4 in the conference to really even get a shot at getting a national championship. If you're not that, then you can go ahead and kiss your season goodbye. People are going to fly away from your school when you think that they're not going to be in a position to be top 12 in the country no more. So it's going to be different. To me, I think Texas and Oklahoma, and you think of the other college football conference realignment with other conferences, is going to be detrimental on falling completely off, because if you don't transition to the new way we're transitioning into, people are not going to look at your school as a top place to go anymore. This isn't, can we be the best Pac-12 team in the country and still have a shot to be conference champions? It's not going to be that no more. It's going to be, can we be the top 3 in our conference? Otherwise, we're not going to be on TV no more. So Oklahoma Venables got a real big task in his hand. I'm so interested to watch this season. Oklahoma does not have a cakewalk, and neither does Texas. Texas is going to have to be ready week 2. They got to face the Cheaters in Michigan week 2 and at Michigan. So to me, It's going to be some real prime time football when you think of what college football is turning into. But I think the biggest thing to me is you really got to be fast turning. This conference, this team, this way we produce things has got to turn over fast and in a hurry, because everybody else is already ready. I promise you, Georgia's ready for the big time changes in college football. Teams like Bama are always going to have recruits coming in, so they're ready. There's going to be teams that it's going to be, I think, yes, it's a bigger opportunity for other teams to step into the forefront, but I think it's also a big opportunity for the big time teams to continue dominance, just because they get the most exposure, get the most recruits, get the best teams. So it's gonna be real interesting. But conference realignment is guiding people on a short leash when it comes to your season.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm gonna use that to segue into our last topic. You know, we getting deep into this live stream real quick, but next let's get into a lot of what this discussion has turned into, and that's who's gonna win the conferences. Right? You got Power Four conferences now in college football. Those four conferences, whoever wins those conference title games, you are in guaranteed a top four spot in the college football playoff. Right? So you got, I don't know how many teams do y'all think? I think you're realistically looking at three teams in the SEC fighting for that top spot. I've got it narrowed down in the Big Ten to two teams. Big 12, and my prediction, I'm gonna go ahead and put it out right now. I got Utah winning the Big 12. With the team that they have bringing over from the Pac-12. And then for the ACC, I think that kind of just threw a chip in there. I won't mention that team up north's name. We don't mention them taters up there, but um, I think they have a shot. And you're looking at Miami also for the ACC getting that spot for the ACC. But looking at those four teams, and I would just want to break down my SEC case right now. I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't got Georgia in the conference championship game. Off rip.
Hmm.
I'm gonna put that out there already. You look at Georgia's schedule for this upcoming season, they're opening against Clemson. Clemson don't have no offense, or that team up north, they don't have no offense. We ain't talking about them. I think they'll win that one, but you still have a hard schedule where you got to go to Alabama for a night game at the end of September. In the first quarter of the season, you got to go to Bama. Then you got to go to Texas, and you got to go to Ole Miss this year, who Ole Miss ain't playing around with nobody this year. Those are you mean to tell me Georgia's gonna come out of this season as another undefeated team with no more than two losses? I don't see it. I got them losing possibly. I got them losing a guaranteed two games this year. I'm gonna put that on record right now. Georgia's gonna knock down two games. You look at the other two teams that I have, which is my two teams that are in the conference championship game, which is going to be Alabama and Texas. I got the two of them in there. I think Bama's schedule is favorable to them, and I got Texas' schedule favorable to them as well. You look at Bama's schedule, your toughest games right now is probably at home against Georgia, and then you got to go on the road to LSU with a new quarterback, a new offense going on over there. Don't know if they got the defense figured out at LSU yet. And then you got to go on the road to Oklahoma and Tennessee. Both of those, I think you got those. Tennessee has a young quarterback, and then Oklahoma is still trying to figure out their way in the transition. You got to fight. Oklahoma has to play you late in the season in their first year in the SEC. I think that's troublesome for them. And then you look at Texas, right? Texas's hardest games, I think they got a pretty easy schedule, right? You got to go to Michigan. We don't know what Michigan is going to look like with their new team, new head coach going on. And then at the same time, as Texas, you get Georgia at home. And then after that, what you got to deal with? You got to go to A&M. Who knows what A&M is going to look like, right? So I think dealing with those three, who do you got winning that conference as far as the SEC? And I think between Alabama and Texas. Now, don't get me wrong. I think all three of these teams can make the playoffs, but that's the three-team race I got right now in the SEC. What do y'all think right now?
Yeah. All three of those teams. I'll say this: I've got Bama winning the SEC. I don't have them going undefeated. I got them with a loss during the season. I got that loss to Georgia, but I do have Alabama winning the SEC. I think LSU defensively is going to come around. I don't think you can be as bad as they've been and be called LSU and your coach be named Brian Kelly and defense continuously to be this bad. If they can find a way to play defense, LSU is going to be a problem. Texas is going to be a problem. I'm not sleeping on Ole Miss either. Ole Miss's schedule is going to end up kind of biting them. We all know what Lane Kiffin does toward the end of his schedule. He runs out really nice. He'll rattle off 6-7 wins in a row, and he'll go ahead and get his team in the top 10. And then he'll play, Bama tough for a quarter, and he'll play teams tough for a quarter. But then he just gives up. But I do think he's going to be there. But at the end of the day, I've been in Tuscaloosa a couple times, man, over the past couple of weeks, and just from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, Jalen Milroe is looking like a legitimate Heisman candidate. This offense that Kalen DeBoer is putting together is just as crispy as the one he had at Washington, with better athletes from front to back, right? The only question mark is defense, but what I'm hearing is the defense is looking really, really good schematically, right? The athletes and talent is there. Don't sleep on the Crimson Tide. The SEC is going to have a stellar year this year. At a minimum, 3 teams, Alabama, Georgia, Texas. On the top end, I'll say 5, and that's bringing LSU and either or Ole Miss and Missouri into the fold. So it could be as few as 3, as many as 5. If it's 5, that means that the rest of the country may not be doing as well with this conference realignment, but the SEC is going to thrive and eat this year.
So I agree with both of y'all. I think that when you think of the top teams in the country, I think the SEC is going to have around 3. I'm with Sean. I can really think of 5, but I say different teams. I can say Tennessee up there as well, right along with a team like Auburn or somebody like that who could really make a sneaky run and get some upset wins. So you really got to think about what SEC got in this arsenal. But I know we're SEC dominant podcast, so we're going to brag and boast about SEC. But I think when we think about the top 4 teams in the country, I think Ohio State and Ryan Day got everything in the world to prove. Because I think they ultimately have the second best roster in the country outside of Georgia. So I think Georgia's roster experience is what's going to have them being a 1-loss team at the end of the season. I think they're really going to be a top-tier team just because of experience and roster talent. I see Ohio State being right around where they're placed right now, 2 to 3. But I think that they really have to have the best quarterback play they can get. And I don't know if they can have that right now with what they got. I think they got the best quarterback talent on the roster. He's just not starting for them. So we're going to really see what Ohio State can put together with this team they got right now. When you think about the ACC, y'all are just disappointing to me. So I'm going to really give Miami the audience that is looking for right now when it comes with the hype that's coming with it. I'm going to give y'all the opportunity. And to me, when you think about the SEC, to me, I really think that it's going to be up to Bama. And I think it's going to be up to Texas as to who can win the SEC. I think it's going to be one of those 2 teams. Big 12, I got Kansas State, versus Utah. But I think it's going to be something that's going to be a real nip and tuck type season. I think it's going to be a team that's going to start out slow and gain momentum in that type of conference. But those, to me, are going to be kind of the 4 areas that I'm going to be watching really closely. But there's going to be so much fun football to watch this season. I only put Bama in there just because of the aspect of I think you got a coach that's going to be really creative with talent he's never been able to touch before. So those 2 things, and of course, Jalen Milroe is my Heisman candidate. I think he's going to walk away with it. But there's so much fun stuff that's going to watch this year. I think it's going to be an amazing year of college football. So I think we got a lot to talk on, a lot of points that we're going to get into. But to me, the top 4 is always going to be the top 4, and that's not going to change for a long time in college football.
Yeah. So real quick, I just wanted to hop on. I didn't give my Big Ten. I let it slip past. I didn't think about it, but I'm with you too, Drew, about Ohio State. I think Ohio State is definitely a top tier team. When are they going to wake up and try to show up and go get that national championship? I feel like we've been talking about them from year in and year out, going into this year in the playoffs. And them coming up short. I feel like they should have won that game against Georgia. What was that, year before last? But at the same time, I think there's marks that Ohio State has to hit. One of them this year is you got to beat Michigan. You've lost to Michigan 3 years in a row. The 2020 season was canceled due to COVID. But at the same breath, you look at your schedule, right? As far as your first real test is not to the first week of October, which is Iowa. Who knows where Iowa going to be by that time of the year? They might not even be ranked. Then after that, you got to go to Oregon, which is the 2 teams I've got at the top of that conference. I think those 2 teams are going to be the 2 teams, and we talked about this before, teams that could possibly be playing 3 times in one season, once in the playoffs, once in the championship game, and then once again in the regular season. I think Ohio State and Oregon are going to be those 2 teams fighting for that spot in the Big Ten. But after Oregon, you've got Nebraska, which I'm not a Matt Rule believer. I don't believe in them. You got to go to Penn State. Who knows what happens at that game? And then you've got Michigan at the end of your season. Um, the quarterback situation for Ohio State is very interesting. You've got the weapons. You brought in Will Howard. I think Will Howard is a very serviceable quarterback coming from Kansas State. Um, but my thing with him is you got to get him to understand we're not wanting you to be a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Be a Brock Purdy. Be a game manager, right? Get the ball to all these playmakers on this offense. Just get the ball out your hands, get it to them, let them make plays. You'll have a successful season. Um, Now, when you look over to the Oregon side of it, there's a team that's challenging them. You know, you look at them, they don't have a tough game until the Ohio State game, which is the biggest weekend in all of college football. I can't wait till we get to that weekend, which is October 12th. It's going to be crazy from top to bottom, from noon to midnight. You've got top tier games on every single time slot. But after that, you only got Ohio State and then you got to go to Michigan. Other than that, you got a cakewalk to the end of the season. You don't have any other real game test ahead of you if you're Oregon to challenge you from getting to the end of the season, getting in that playoffs and getting that conference championship win. I got Ohio State winning it and getting one of those top 4 spots, but watch out for Oregon in that Big Ten over there. They got a good shot at being something serious.
They do. Listen, Ohio State, real quick. I know we're winding down, but think back when Urban Meyer retired. Ryan Day was handpicked. Okay, they didn't have a coaching search. You know what I'm saying? They didn't open up. They didn't get a headhunter to go and find the best coach that was out there. Urban Meyer said, "I'm leaving. I suggest you guys take Ryan Day." Okay, I'm not saying Ryan Day's a bad coach. What I am saying is Ryan Day has not shown me yet he can win the big game. Okay, or big games, right? Because he hadn't beat Michigan yet in his own conference, and he hasn't performed in the playoffs yet. He's got the luxury of having just as much talent, if not more, than the Alabamas and Georgias. He can line up and do all that stuff really well. But I really think the problem, what's going to hurt Ohio State this year is pressure. Ryan Day. They talk about him being on the hot seat if he don't beat Michigan. Right? And this is a guy that has an incredible college football coaching record as a head football coach. His record is impeccable, but he ain't won nothing yet. You know what I'm saying? He beats the team he's supposed to beat, loses to the team that he's supposed to lose to. He's going to either press and lose or get smart and lean on his coaching staff to help him win football games. If Ryan Day presses too hard with this roster, if you look at his roster from top to bottom, he got a good one. Oh, he got a good one. He got a real good one. And if they don't beat Michigan, make it to the playoffs and lose and don't win a national championship, it's national championship or bust for Ryan Day. He may be out of there at the end of this year. And that's crazy to say because his record is so good, but he's not winning the big games. This is going to be interesting for me to watch this year is what does Ryan Day do? I like the guy. I just don't know whether he got the juice to get it done.
I'll be honest with you, right? Records to me are only good when you're trying to dance in the club. That's the only thing I'm not really care about your record. To me, Ryan Day can go kiss somebody else's ass because to me, he's not getting the job done. Okay, cool. He was handpicked. What was he handpicked to do, Sean?
Win a national championship, period.
And has he done it?
No.
You got to get your ass out the door. I'm sorry, that's what we're here for. I'm so tired of this soft mentality when it comes to these coaches that are hired for big time moments. It's not the fact that Ryan Day that he can't beat Michigan, man. It's the fact that Michigan is the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And you can't do that.
Yep.
So Michigan, to me, which is my point in this whole thing, started Ohio State season, which was too late in the season for you to have a big true test. With this college realignment, to me, what I think Ohio State's going to be more of a opponent than past years is because they're going to have more team testing moments throughout the season earlier than Michigan. If Bama's first test in the season was Auburn, I don't think they will be ready for national championship. That's too much. That's too late in the season.
Yeah.
Ohio State's really got to take advantage of having these big time games earlier in the season. But to me, with the reason why I think they're going to fail this year, years past, years to come, I think they can get it done. But this year, Will Howard is not the guy. I don't think he is that guy. He didn't make any big statements at Penn State. I don't think you're gonna come to a bigger spotlight and then step up. So I don't think that's just gonna happen. But to me, I think everything we've said about them is true. I think they have the second best roster in the country. I think if there's ever a time to do it, out of the next 2 years, they gotta do it. But to me, Ryan Day as a coach, if you can't beat at least Michigan, and now it's gonna be Michigan and Oregon, we're gonna have some real conversation we got to get to because I can bring somebody else in that can get those things done. And I got some real big names. We're gonna get to it later in the season. That's why all y'all got to tune into this podcast whenever we go live, whenever we go anything, y'all got to tune in because we have the best conversations, the best topics, the best things that you're gonna think of when you think of college football right here on this podcast. So to me, everything that's coming for Ohio State is too big for Ryan Day's personality, which is ain't much. He got to go. He got to go. So to me, everything that the college football season has been laid out. We're about to get to the real nitty and gritty. We're about to get to the potatoes of what we're gonna see this year, and it's gonna be fascinating and entertaining to say the least.
All right. Well, yeah. Hey, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a great link. You can look forward to us being live every single Sunday at 8 o'clock. We're gonna try to get on here, give y'all our immediate reactions from Saturday games. I know next week we got a Sunday night game between LSU and USC, but you know what? Hey, maybe we'll get a live reaction while we on the air. Some craziness going on in that game. But other than that, look for us throughout the week. We should have some videos. We got two game of the weeks that we're gonna hand pick between the three of us that we're gonna highlight and get into. You'll have a separate video for those, and then you'll have our complete SEC breakdowns week in and week out for the entirety of the college football season. But hey, I thank y'all for tuning in. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you get notified. Hey, you see we got the Bam up there. We got Cox over here. Hey, Gamecocks all day. But hey, look, hey, thank y'all for tuning in. We'll holler at y'all next time. I'll let them give y'all they exits, and then we'll hit